When a man curses his child, it is a terrible thing. The words of an African proverb that bring us into this episode of the Jamaican Dadz podcast. I'm Dennis Brooks.
I'm Alan Campbell.
I'm Garth Williams, and we are
Jamaican Dadz. Well, this program seeks to provide a functional forum to tackle many of the taboo topics that concern fatherhood and parenting.
And in this week, our main discussion is about being a stepfather. Yeah, being a stepfather.
I was waiting for that.
Right?
I was waiting for that.
But before we get there, let's fire off with the opening salvo. In this week's opening salvo, another hot one, should religion play a role in parenting? Should religion play a role in parenting? Marlon with the laugh. Go ahead, Marlon.
Go ahead, Marlon, since as you find this.
Because I think religion is part of the reason for a lot of horrible parenting.
Yeah.
Seriously. Spare the rod and spoil the child and abuse the picnic, all of them something there. But I am not a very religious person, so it will probably play a little role in how I raise, but then you don't have to be a religious person to have a moral compass and have ethics and things like that. I think on a whole, you can be a good parent despite religion, not because of religion. If you think about it, you see, I have to be careful how I answer this because I don't want it to be seen as an attack on religion.
Right.
Because religion does have its purpose and it does for many provide good guidance in how they do things.
Right.
Thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, etc., etc. If my child wants to explore religion later on, as he grows, that's up to him. I will not stop him at all. But I don't think he will be having me as an example of a super religious person, so perhaps nor his mother, so perhaps that might influence how he looks at it, but then.
So if he came over to my house for a sleepover.
Him can pray, him not for segregate.
Okay, I was like, no. Okay. No, but if he said,
he'll probably approach religion like just as something.
But if he said that Uncle Dennis made him and Jackson pray before bed, you wouldn't be offended.
No, it wouldn't be offended.
Okay.
Like I said,
because some parents would be that way, yo, no tell me picking about no God, or no tell me picking about no Jesus, or whatever.
I'm a firm believer in a supreme being.
Of course, you have to.
You understand? I'm not super religious about it, where, and I see the flaws.
So your path to acknowledgement of this supreme being is not through organized religion.
Actually, it went through organized religion, and probably I reached at that point.
Or as a result of you being in Jamaica, where there's a path prescribed.
Listen,
for
me couldn't go nowhere else, me never go to church.
Right.
So even my parents used to let me out and have that freedom to go out and we go fairs or wherever we go.
Right.
No matter how tired it be Sunday morning, you better be up and nice
ready for
and
church
dressed and go to church.
Yeah.
You can go out Saturday.
I saw a meme online recently where how them split screen, right? So the girl comes on one side of the screen and you see a crowd gathered staring into the camera, right? And the girl goes, "Mommy say I can't come, but I have to bring clothes to go to church." And everybody's like, "Oh,
yeah, I saw it. I remember that one.
I mean, I think generally, I don't know if we've all been there, but many of us have been there. In a situation like that. I personally don't think that religion should have a role in parenting. However, if it does, then okay. You understand what I'm saying? I don't think that non-religious parents, even atheists, agnostics, are going to raise terrible children because of the absence of religion in their homes, right? Because I've seen the opposite happen, where very religious parents, very religious households have really done some, let me just terrible things. Let's just say terrible things to their children, not only physically but also psychologically, right? So for me, if you are able as a parent to be able to honor and prescribe certain moral and ethical guidelines for your life and also for your children, that you raise well-thinking, well-adjusted, considerate adults, right? Then perfect, right? And if that happens with the aid of religion, okay, but I don't think it has to happen because of religion. And I think I'm kind of just carrying on from Marlon's point.
I will, okay. I approach the moot differently because it said, should religion play a role in parenting?
Right.
And for me, the should is it desirable? Is it favorable? I'm not saying that, so what the question has put to me, I don't interpret it as a necessary condition or a sufficient condition for parenting.
So we're singing from the same.
Right? So, but for me, should it? Yes, absolutely it should.
Yeah.
But
ideally is what you're
because it is desirable, it is functional, it is of use. Yeah. So in that regard, my answer is yes. Must it? Probably not for you. I'm not making a universal declaration of truth. But for me, though my level of religiosity is not what it used to be. What I would say is I am a very religious person.
Okay.
And so my context within which I would live my life and which would then apply to parenting would be influenced by Christian worldviews. I cannot help the fact that I I grew up in a particular kind of home. I went to a particular kind of church. I went to a particular kind of school that applied religion to me in a way that I found functional.
Right.
And those principles affected how I saw parenting. There are things that within the context of religion, I would have seen and said, I am not going to do things how Pastor so-and-so did it, or Elder so-and-so, or missionary or evangelist so-and-so did it. I'm going to do it this way. I can also say, though, that there are many people within the context of a religious environment who would have provided good guidance for me.
Right. Right.
Without whom I probably would have been lost as an angry teenager. And so, for me, I see religion as functional and desirable for the things that make it work. Now, mind you, religion is sometimes a bad word because religion is what human beings apply to spirituality. That's the systems that they put in place and the structure that they put in place. And I don't agree with everything that I've learned within a religious context. Right? So, but that doesn't mean I reject religion. I think that religion, in terms of the things, for instance, and my religious worldview is influenced by Christianity. Right. And so I think that I was significantly influenced in terms of how I see parenting and how I see marriage and the things that I think I should be and do as a man are all influenced by religion. So the kind of father I am is influenced by religion.
Religion is flawed because man is flawed.
And man never make God, but man make religion and the rules that apply with how we access God. And sometimes, like, you hear the rules and the different things that we often find offensive and the bad things that of religion, that those are not God, those are not Jesus, those are church.
But that's why I'm saying that in saying religion, I am using religion in the context of that.
Yeah.
This creation. Which is what I said to him, if Judah, I mean, his name is Judah.
Right.
Judah means praise.
Yeah.
You know, it's also the land of Judah. Again, all of that is connected. But if he wants to explore religion, you know.
But what context will you give him to explore it if you don't give him a foundation? Like, yo, if you want to explore it, explore
to be fair, hold on. Because even in my household, right, I was raised in a very strict religious context.
Right.
My household, when it comes to religion, is pretty much fluid, really. You know what I mean?
So if Noel says, Dad, I think I'm a Muslim, Okay.
Yeah, by all means, I'm gonna buy you the mat, everything.
Right.
I will support.
We're not going to stop cook pork though. Just know that.
She does not go eat. Eat pork. But right. But my whole that's funny. But the thing is, the school also provides a bit of context, and I'm very happy for her and Nick too when they are studying religious education, because they come to me with their questions. Daddy, is this right? Is that religion wrong? And I'm like, thank you for asking this question, because I now get the opportunity to say to them, all right, so here's what's up, and I break it down. Obviously, religion, or the study of it, can be rather complex. So for 8 and a 12-year-old, there are certain elements of it.
And they're very abstract concepts that you're trying to break
down into it, right? But I give them the history of these religions, inclusive of timelines. And one of the questions Nick asked was, then how is this one right and that one wrong when this one start before the other one? You know? Wow. And I'm like, that's my that's my son.
Ask question.
You understand me? I struggle to answer in a simple way for it. You understand me? But I know that is a conversation I can come back to later on. Now, because of the nature of our education system, them pray when school start, when them go for lunch, them say grace, and at the end of school, them have them closing day prayers. You understand me? So there is that very strong Christian influence on them. But thankfully, because of the study of religious education, it gives me and every parent the opportunity to engage your children around this matter of religion, and then you can choose
because
how it influences parenting.
In looking at the prep schools, that because he's 2 now, which means that by 3 he should be going into,
a feeder,
and there are 3 on the list for us. 2 of them, one of them very Catholic in background.
Okay.
The other one is Catholic, but it's not. From what I know, it doesn't push as hard. And there's another that's non-denomination. It isn't.
Right.
Which that's the one. Outside of the religious factor, that's the one that I wanted to send him, because they're very like how I'm raising him. That's how them conduct. Free, allow kids to make them decision on what they want to play, raise, support, and that's all. So that's where I'm going. But I didn't want to even put him into a highly religious school like that to shape. Yes, like I said,
the opposite.
I didn't want to
and I'm the opposite. Like
because,
me,
because I think it's unfair, because I'd be making a choice for him almost.
And it produces a conflict for him at a very early phase too. You understand? Because in the home is one thing, and then in the school setting, it's, you know what I mean. So
I didn't want it. So like.
Well, for me, Susan and I had a conversation. I said, "Look here, I want a school that has good on this, all of these academics,
right?
A good feeder that
So
it give a good start,
right?
but must have a very strong Christian foundation.
Yeah.
And so, we were looking at 2 particular ones. I think we've settled on one in particular.
Right.
They wear purplish kind of sometimes on all right now. So
yeah.
That's where I did not, and that for me was that's the one off the bat when Justine me say last choice.
So Judah and Jackson are going to same school unless a high school.
Yeah.
Definitely not the purple school.
No, God, no.
Guys,
God, no.
No.
Absolutely not.
If our children are to learn anything from North Street, let it be the Gleaner Company.
No. Light blue is not a bad school.
I'm sorry.
Let's be fair.
I'm big on light blue. I'm big on light blue.
I might actually say in dark blue a country.
Right?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
But I guess we've come to some kind of consensus here that really and truly it depends on your own upbringing and where you're coming from and how your life has been structured. But it's always a good thing to give it consideration. That has brought us to the end of the opening salvo. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back with the meat of the matter, it will be about being a stepfather. Stay with us.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We are live and we are in the midst of the discussion that we call the meat of the matter. This week, the discussion, our topic is the life of a stepfather. It is a topic that many men discuss. I can tell you, many of us discuss it because it's a part of life. As a man's looking possibly to settle down. But it is something that is often misconstrued and people, need information. So our guests today are Dr. Grace Alvaranga, a psychologist, and we have a stepfather in the person of Aljuray McKenzie. Welcome to the program, Aljuray. Welcome to the program, Dr. Alvaranga.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with you, Al, because when we speak of the role of the stepfather, I guess it's different to different people. For instance, are you a stepfather who is the sole father role, or are you stepfather who has to share the role with a biological father? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Certainly. Before I start, I want to say thanks for having me. It's indeed a pleasure to be a part of this program. I also want to thank all the hardworking, dedicated, proficient, and efficient fathers out there. Just to keep on doing their best. Keep on doing what you should do to make your child or children a prospect for the future. My role as a stepfather is a shared role. I work in conjunction with her biological father, so we both work together, hand in hand. He lives about 5 miles away from where I live. So from time to time, he would come and pick up Najeen, my stepdaughter, or I would oftentimes take her there and go and pick her up from that location and take her back home. So it's a joint. I would say it's a joint partnership then between two fathers, biological and adopted father.
Good. Just share with us a little bit about.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No. Well, finish your statement, Dennis, because my question might take a little longer time to answer.
No, I want you to finish, Garth, because I want to put a question to Dr. Alvaranga based on what he's already beginning to unpack here. So go ahead.
Sure. I would just want to get an idea, Al, of your journey to becoming a stepfather. How did that come about? Your thoughts getting involved with this your wife now at that time.
It's funny you should ask that question. In 2008, I would have graduated from the police academy. After graduating, I was posted to the Kingston Eastern Division. I would have been dispatched to the Duane Park Police Station immediately after. Whilst at the Duane Park Police Station, I saw this lovely young lady walking past the station, very long hair, very voluptuous and curvaceous. And I've been a young man from the hills of North Clarendon, became very intrigued by this young lady and alerted her, went out, had a conversation with her. At that point in time, I never knew that she had a daughter. It was later on in the relationship, during the conversations with her through texting and other mediums, that I would have realized that she has a daughter. She was 2 years old. The first intervention with me and this little tiny and young lady by the name of Najee, she was 2 years old. When she saw me, she actually ran from me and told her mom that I was, for want of a better word, ugly. Ugly. This was due to the fact that I just graduated from training school, so I was
People are known to
malnourished
be ugly
stage.
when they're
Yeah,
just
I was slim. My face was very bony and all that.
There are people are known
nevertheless,
to be ugly when they leave training school.
yes,
For the
very, very. Yeah. So uh, nevertheless, I was nevertheless being young. I was in my 20s. I tried to buy her love by getting her dolls and sweets and all that, and work my way into the relationship with her, because I know, being as smart as I am, that if you're one with the child, then the mother will naturally fall for you, and show you more affection if she realizes that the child takes on to you. I would have been in her life from then until now. She's currently 13 years old, attending high school. The relationship is a very good one. Is a very good one. During that time, I would have gotten a son with my wife, my now wife. I realized that as a dad and as a biological father, and also as an adopted father, I have to be very careful in how I share my love and affection. I have to try my best to share the attention, the love and affection equally. And if it is not done in a careful way or in an equal way, then one of them oftentimes feels, or would come to the conclusive presumption that I love one more than the other. So being a stepfather, while it is very good, it's a very hectic job, and you have to just be meticulous and just be aware, and just try to create that balance between yourself and the adopted child, as also the biological child. So that's just my take on it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay.
Dr. Alvaranga, again, several things to unpack here, because the dynamics of being a step parent are often challenging, quite frankly. So, I mean, let's talk about some of the specifics of Aljuray before we go general. So, for instance, do you find that you would advise people differently depending on whether or not there is a biological father in the life of the child? And how do you negotiate space and respect?
Definitely we would, because when you think about being a stepfather, one writer in the area actually states that it is like stepping into a minefield. So it is a very sensitive area. And at any point, if you step on the wrong spot, there can be an explosion. So it is really a delicate area. And I like Aljuray's experience because, interestingly, he has covered a number of areas. Well done, Aljuray.
Thank
That
you.
we would give us tips on being a stepfather. But there is an importance in identifying if there's a biological father and the role of the biological father. But one of the main things with the stepfather, I would say at the onset, is to remember that you are not the replacement. You're not the biological father. And that has
Yep.
to be very clear. When it is not clear, then we start to encounter some challenges. Now, once that is recognized, I'm not the biological father, then you start to think about your role as a stepfather, which primarily now is a mentor. And you're going to be a father as if this was the father. It was your child. You are the father of your own child. But in this case, because you do not have that biological connection, you're primarily a parental role model, a parental mentor. And then the other dynamics will come in. But I guess as we continue talking, we can look at the other areas and the different intricacies as it
Let me,
relates to being a stepdad.
but let me take you up on that point though, because when you say you're not the biological father and you're not a replacement, and you have to appreciate that, but then you also have to consider the fact that, say, for instance, it's a case of you are now married to this woman and you live together. So you have a home and you have rules in your home, and you have a child who lives in your home. And then now you have another figure who is biological father and has authority of his own. And then some of the time those rules of different homes clash. And then how do you assert your presence in your home, managing you is man of your yard, but then you do have to bear in mind that there's another man who is an authority figure in this child's life.
And Dennis, this is where the discipline comes into place, because discipline has to be discussed and agreed on by both persons. And it also has to be exercised with what I would want to say extreme caution, because in trying to discipline the stepchild, you do not want to send the wrong message, but discipline must be enforced. So that has to be discussed with both parents and agreed on how discipline will be exercised. But it has to be, because it is a part of the whole child rearing process.
Aljuray, what say you on that? From experience, of course.
From experience, as it relates to me, at first, at the inception of my relationship with my wife, I was very confused, I must say, as it relates to the enforcing of discipline, as it relates to Najid. This was partly due to the fact that I didn't want to over exercise discipline or exercise discipline, as in my mind I thought it would erode or derail the type of relationship that I had with my wife. And in layman term, I thought she would feel a way about it. I thought she would withdraw herself from me and basically turn to her child and pay more attention to her child rather than paying attention to me. So I was very fearful. So I was timid, for want of a better word, as it relates to enforcing discipline in its entirety. As it relates to Najid.
Was it something that you discussed with her, though? I mean, having felt the way you did, being caught betwixt and between in a way, you didn't want to kind of drive a wedge between you and your wife by introducing discipline in a certain way. Did you have a discussion with her to say, hey, this is the way I think we should go about it, or what do you recommend?
I didn't approach her initially. Eventually, sometime after, I would have had words with her about it. She would have went to Najid, spoke to Najid. I would have had conversations, and I must say, based on the conversations that I had with her and Najid, the relationship with me and Najid is much improved. So communication is very important.
And we're gonna have to take a quick break right here on that thought, on that point. So Dennis, Grace, I know you have a couple of things to add right now, but you're tuned into the Jamaican Dadz podcast, The Life of a Stepfather. We're speaking with Aljuray McKenzie, a stepdad, right here in Jamaica. We'll be right back with more after these messages.
We're back here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast, and we are having a conversation about the life of a stepfather. It is not necessarily your particular life experience, but feel free to shoot us your messages and share your own experience of being a stepfather. We have a stepfather, our guest Aljuray McKenzie, and we have Grace Alvaranga, a psychologist, here joining us in the conversation. Before we went to the break, we were speaking about the importance of communication in all areas of the relationship, both the relationship of with your partner and with your children and stepchildren. Grace, one of the things that also jumps out at me in listening to Aljuray speak of his own experience is the variable called gender. Do you think that the gender of the child in relation to the opposite sex parent matters. So you have a father being stepfather to a daughter versus stepfather to a son. Do you think that matters, especially in how you navigate space? Because there are some fathers, biological, who are going to say, look here, I don't want that man around my daughter, and that kind of a thing. And then you have to behave in a particular way.
Definitely, Dennis, gender matters, and it matters as it relates to the way you're going to communicate with the child. Even outside of the stepfather relationship, the gender does matter, because how girls think, it's totally different from how boys think and how each gender reacts. So that has to be taken into consideration. But when you have the step parent situation now, it is a little bit heightened, because there's a greater level of sensitivity, particularly when there is a gender difference. So what I normally recommend in that case is that a stepfather, being father to a girl, it's being you. Just be naturally you, how you would normally relate to females, and take it from there. If there are differences, what can happen is that it can be discussed with the mother. The mother will know the peculiarities of the child and the sensitivity. And so in doing that, you will grow with both mother and child. But the gender difference has to be taken into consideration. And as I said before, even in situations where it's the biological parent.
Yeah, there's something that I
Does
should
age?
have.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's. I think we're going to end up taking like a backtrack in the conversation, because. But hold that thought, Dennis, because I see where you're going with age. I wanted to get something from Al that I forgot to kind of use as a follow-up question. Al, you mentioned that it was after speaking to the young lady for a while, your wife now, that you discovered that she had a child.
Yes.
What was it like for you, whether difficult or easy or straightforward, getting used to interacting with the biological father? Did that create any kind of a situation? How did you navigate that bit of the journey?
Surprisingly, when I met Najade's biological father, I think every father would have done an analysis or assessment of the male that will be in their son or their daughter's life. So he would have assessed me, and based on my profession and based upon how I approached him and how I carry myself, we had a very cordial relationship as it relates to Najade. He at some point in time will even call Najade and tell Najade that to ensure or make sure that he shows me respect. So, and the same respect that he had for me was the same respect that I generated back to him. So it wasn't a situation where I superimpose myself on him and say that I am in Najade's life now and I'm the father and I'm the man. I did not do that. I offered him respect. I showed him respect, and I didn't try to take over his role as a father. I didn't try to force Najade to call me dad or anything like that, to take away anything from him being the biological father. So I think the relationship or the transition between myself and Najade's biological father was a very smooth one, based upon the interaction we had.
It sounds like it's influenced strongly by the personalities involved. But also, I was going to ask about the whole point of what do you call people? Because I don't know that I want to look up at calling me Dennis, but at the same time, is it an uncle thing? Is it a dad thing? Do you feel it out and see how it evolves naturally? Grace, what do you recommend?
I would recommend that as you navigate and you develop the relationship, that it will come. But one of the things that is popular recommended is that you don't force the child initially to say that. Once you have established a comfortable relationship, it will evolve into the child calling you dad. So whatever makes the child feel comfortable. And boy, Al, your situation is so perfect. It just fit the textbooks. You did everything right. There was communication, with
Yes.
the biological father. And I tell you, communication every time, everywhere it stops. And because of that, the father, he could do his assessment, you do your assessment. And as you establish right there, all of that would have been played out before your daughter. And it built a significant component of all relationships, which was trust. You were sold. You did the right thing. But in terms of the name call, in your case, I'm sure it's easy. Dad came easy. But initially, in other situations where the relational dynamics is different, it is recommended that you don't force the child to say dad. They will eventually grow into it.
And if they choose not to, that's fine as well.
Yes, that's fine. Because relationships evolve over time.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yes, and I want to thank the constabulary force, because whilst at the academy I was exposed to psychology and sociology, and I think that would have aided me and helped me in a significant way as it relates to transition into my wife's life, as also Najid's life. So that helped me a lot, and I was fresh out of training, so it was all popping.
Good.
Yes, ma'am. You were
Yeah.
popping, textbook up and running.
Yeah.
Let me ask then, because not everyone is fortunate to come into maybe a child's life when they're an infant or a toddler. You come into the child's life at different stages of development. They're going through their own psychosocial challenges that are the biggest issue that they're going through at that point in their life. How would you say it is different navigating space as stepfather, depending on the age of introduction to the child? Grace?
As it relates to the age of introduction, and you hit it spot on, there can be some difficulty depending on the personality and the relationship that the child has with the initial parent. And then when you bring now the step parent in, it changes. For example, teenagers themselves, they are doing their own differentiation and establishing themselves as an individual. Now, when you bring a new person into that dynamics, you could have some resistance depending on how the person was brought in, what was the existing situation at home before, how the separation went, if there was any separation. And some of those teenage relationships, when you introduce a step parent, it can be very turbulent. Also, some of the adult ones can be too. But if the matter is discussed, even when resistance becomes evident, if it is discussed, once the communication is free and it is flowing and it is discussed, we can navigate the choppy waters.
That's true.
Yeah. Do you think, Al, for example, when the fact that you had met Najid at age 2, that it was a lot easier for you to be assimilated into her life and for that kind of transition and so on?
Certainly, I would have been at a big advantage, knowing that Najid was very young, so I could have placed myself in her life at that tender age, grow with her, bond with her, share things with her. From toddler to 5 years old, that's when a child normally is like a sponge, basically. So once I knew that, so once I realized that, I tried my best to put as much positive positive things and positive thoughts about myself and her in her memory as much as possible, so that will aid in our relationship or our development, because I knew that I was going to be in her life for a long while, because I knew I was going to wed her mother, so I knew I was going to be there for a long time. So
Yes.
I just cemented myself in her life, and I am fortunate to have had that opportunity at that tender age. But as the psychologist said, it's very difficult when the child or children is in their teens, based
Yeah.
on my observation.
You know what I like though, Grace, about Al's approach is it's very calculated, and he clearly applied, as he mentioned just now, the knowledge that he gained while being in training. I suppose what it is saying to us is probably a repeat of the message that we shared in a previous podcast. We're talking about the importance of teaching parenting, because these are things, these are lessons, this is information that would be extremely critical for students to know before they get down that far in life. Yeah.
Exactly. And you are perfectly right there, Gary. And I really believe in this national campaign on teaching parenting and certain psychosocial skills, because it does help in our individual relationships in the home, and that transcends to the wider society. But that would have helped us significantly.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to you, Al. I think you a big round of applause.
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right. We're upon our final break in this segment. You're tuned into the Jamaican Dadz podcast. Life of a Stepfather is what we're discussing this evening. We've got a psychologist, Grace Alvaranga, with us, as well as our special guest, Aljuray McKenzie, who is himself a stepfather. We'll be right back after this.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. If you're just joining us, we're having a conversation on the life of a stepfather. It could be the life of any stepfather anywhere, because they are sometimes sensitive and difficult waters to navigate. Our guests are Grace Alvaranga, psychologist, and stepfather himself, Aljuray McKenzie, Corporal Aljuray McKenzie, I might add. A very proud policeman serving his country. In this segment, we want to get into some nuts and bolts issues, some of the real issues that people have to consider if they're going to make a decision. And Grace, I want to go back to something that you mentioned, because you say that you're supposed to bear in mind that you are not the biological father, but at the same time, you want to give your all in being a father in the child's life. And there are times when disagreements will conquer, teeth and tongue must meet. And mommy will draw that card that every stepfather don't want to hear. My child, this or that, my child, so forth and so on. And it just draw you up, and it can be taxing on you. It can hurt you.
Yeah. I'm glad you went back there, Dennis, because it was deliberate, I would dare say strategic, why I made that statement. Because in being a step parent, you have to bear in mind it protects you psychologically. It is your base that will keep things together. Technically, you are not the biological parent. Now, once you have established that and you have it running in your background like an operating system, that is the platform on which you are going to now execute your parenting skills. So I am not the biological parent, but I'm here to do my best. I'm going to give it my all. We are going to have our conversations. We will try to understand each other as best as we can to maintain a harmonious relationship. But I think if you start with that background, and as I've used as an analogy, consider it your operating system, then it protects you, and not just you, but the child, and by extension, the other parent. It protects you psychologically.
Yeah.
Mm. So then,
I will-
Aljuray, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Dennis, because I think we're going in the same direction.
Garth?
All right. Yeah, Aljuray, I mean, at some point, as Dennis mentioned, you don't want to hear those dreaded 2 words or 3 words, I might be me. At some point, I'm sure your wife would have probably used that phrase. How did it make you feel? How did you respond? And what Grace said about keeping it in the back of your mind that you're not the biological father, running like an operating system, was that somewhat similar to how you've managed to kind of cope?
It was it was somewhat similar. I was told that at a particular time, not in those exact words, but I was told something along that line, and it affected me. It affected me to the point where I went silent for about a week. I didn't comment. I stopped paying Najid attention. I wasn't enforcing rules and regulations in the dwelling as I used to. And I went to her and I spoke to her about it, and she explained the situation to me, and she apologized, and I just snapped back into fatherly mode and started carrying out my duties. But it is something that can affect you psychologically. It can also affect the way that you treat the child, and affect your relationship in general. So it's something that ought not to be said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me just quickly say here that in these situations, it just popped in my head that also to protect your mental space when we do have this, because of course, she spoke out of emotions, and you
Yes.
know, women, we can lash. So, um, when that happens and you think about it, sometimes your response to it can stabilize the situation. Yes, I am aware that I am not the biological parent. I'm aware that it is not my child, but we are parenting together. So sometimes if we can think about a calculated response, it will help to diffuse the situation, stabilize the other individual, and get us back on track a little faster.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Absolutely. I mean, two of the things I think
That's a good way to respond to it. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a couple of things that we have to remember. Yeah, one, you're not the biological father, but guess what happened now? The other side of it too is that mommy has to remember, as well as stepdad has to remember, that you cannot, you can't be like him. You have to just be you. Yeah, you have to be yourself. And in being yourself, you have to also be open to evolving, to becoming what the child also needs to, you know, because different children at different stages, we know, will react in various ways. But when you realize that what this child needs is a more caring approach from you, then if you really want that very much nurturing or caring type, you have to find a way to be that, you know. And if what the child needs is a firm hand, then I'm not talking corporal punishment here, just generally speaking. But if what the child needs is a firm hand, but you're not that kind of person, then you have to find a way to still instill a certain amount of discipline and rules and set boundaries and ensure that these are adhered to. So I just wanted to throw that in as well, because I'm sure it's something that you would have had to realize in your experience, Al.
And
Yes,
good that you threw it
certainly.
in, Gary, because when I listened to it, it just popped in my head again. And these are the parenting skills that we would use biological parent or not. So the only line of demarcation really is just that you are not the biological parent, because you are doing basically everything else the same. You would need to have the conversation about discipline. You would need to have discussion. You would need to understand the child temperament, how they respond to things. So that's the only difference. And once that can be understood and practiced in a constructive way, you would have achieved successful parenting.
Absolutely. Dennis?
Certainly, but bearing in mind, what tip would you give, because you do have a biological child of your own? So one of the challenges that you now have to consider is the challenge of your child or children versus our child or children. And you mentioned earlier, you try not to have any bias in parenting, but some of the times it comes out in terms of differential discipline, because of experiences in the past, or of discipline, certain things that have been said in the past that you might be carrying forward. What tips would you give, Aljuray, for fathers who, you have your child, I have my child, or we have our children, and so how do we smooth everything out and all children are equal?
Certainly. Just try to treat each child as fairly as possible. Don't take sides. Ensure that you have effective communication with both child. Both child are children. Don't see or treat that adopted child as an adopted child. Treat her as your child. Treat her as if you as in the same manner, our way you will treat your biological child. And just be you. Don't try to add or take away from yourself. Just be naturally yourself at all times. And that child, understanding you, knowing what you stand for, knowing the rules and regulations and guidelines that you set, and knowing that those regulations and rules and guidelines are not to break her down or to tear her apart, but to help her to be a better person. So that would just basically be my tips as a stepfather or a biological father. Treat all children equally.
Yeah. And we're getting close to that time around to wrap the segment. From you, Grace, just add, are there any other tips that you would add to stepfathers already in the situation, and gentlemen who are somewhat on the fence? Boy, have a youth, but I'm not sure if we really want to go no further. What should they consider?
Well, Al's summary was perfect, so I just add a few. I just love Al's summary. I love the textbooks, but it's reality, and that is what is so beautiful about it. So it tells us that our psychology textbooks, they are very real. It's, after all, it's human behavior. Just to add to what Al said, one of the things I would encourage stepfathers, having discussed, keep encouraging the child's relationship with their biological father once that is possible, because in some cases it isn't, but where it is, you keep encouraging. And of course, the whole matter of discipline, that discipline should be discussed with both parents, and you exercise it with some amount of caution in relation to not the fear to administer the discipline, but as to the method to be used depending on the child's temperament. And I would also suggest that don't be so centered around the child every time, but find a space for you and your partner sometimes. Schedule some time away from the child where you and your partner can get to bond a little more. And grow, practice some a kind of acceptance. Acceptance is a process. It does not come overnight, and sometimes persons go overboard. They start to do all these fancy things, buy presents, do all the cartwheels, and they overextend themselves, and it can become overbearing in getting to establish that relationship. So what I would suggest is let it go over time. Don't rush the process, basically. And one last thing I would say is, in the name and the calling, I've heard persons in reality say, it's your father, your mother, call him daddy or mommy. And so don't force the child. Once you are genuine and you are establishing a good relationship and you're building on it, the name calling will naturally fall into place.
Yeah, that's a great note on which to end. We could go on and on. Actually, we could probably get two solid programs out of this one. We will certainly call upon you again, Aljuray, and we really congratulate you on the good job that you're doing. So I'd give you a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Right. So keep on keeping on, you and Najeed, and your wife and your son. We wish you all the very best. Grace Alvaranga, as always, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your time and valued experience. I can see the beginnings of great things between the podcast and yourself, Grace. So we look forward to that.
Always a pleasure reading about the gentleman.
Absolutely.
Good.
All right, Dennis, thank you so much. We're going to come back and close the show right after this. You're still tuned into the Jamaican Dadz podcast.
Welcome back to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. If you're just joining us, we have been talking about being a stepfather. It is an important function, an important role.
Yes.
It is an honorable role. Don't make nobody make you feel bad about it. There are many amazing fathers who have made the difference in many lives. And the only difference is biology, and that is not a huge difference.
Yeah.
That is not a huge difference. So big up to all the stepfathers out there. Continue doing good. But that's all the time for the program that we have for this week.
Absolutely. So we've got to say thanks again to Tashai Grant and the production team that make us look and sound so good. So thank you and big up on yourself. As always, we encourage you to connect with us on social at Jamaican Dadz. That's Facebook and Instagram, Dadz with a Z. Use the hashtag Jamaican Dadz to let us know your thoughts. Or you can send us an email, JamaicanDadzPodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, you take care.